Hello everybody, welcome back. You're on the couch with me, and in today's video, I'm actually going to walk you through 7 core phases that led me to become a business coach, along with some of the key learnings that I had in every single phase, again relevant to coaching. So my name is Bram, thanks for joining in. Let's just jump in it right away. Phase number 1. Many moons ago, I was born in a small country in Europe called Belgium. And in Belgium, the country of beers and chocolates, and yes, diamonds, I was actually raised in a family business. So this family business of ours was particularly in hospitality, meaning catering, takeaway food and restaurants, as well as retail, meaning clothing. I grew up in this business as a young boy, and already at the age of 9 started to get a bit of a taste of what it meant of working in a family environment and also being able to serve customers. And that was a really good learning lesson. One of the things that I definitely learned over time, especially as I went into my late teens, is that people that are working together as business partners, sometimes they can get quite greedy. Long story short, in our family business, my uncle and my mum were business partners, and one thing that struck me was that my uncle was starting to really take advantage of certain situations where my mum could have stepped in and made him accountable for it, and therefore she could have corrected the situation. That didn't happen. Things got really worse. And because there was no kind of limitation, as people do, they kind of really start pushing the boundaries every time further and further, until it got to a point where the relationship between the two of them was completely disjointed. He started to completely mistreat her to the point that I didn't want to see it anymore. And I actually said to him one day, if you think that I'm going to step in your shoes and take over this business while you will be pulling my strings as a puppet in the back end, it ain't going to happen. I'm actually going to go my own path. And it was my first time for me to really speak my truth, align myself with my values so that I could live more in sync with my values, because the last thing you want to do in life is to get caught out doing something for other people's sake at your own expense and pay the price for it. Now that was my first learning lesson, the importance of values and living in line with it, and also making sure that we always hold ourselves and others accountable. Because if there's no accountability, people will push other people around, and it doesn't work that way. I then decided to go the other way, and I wanted to understand how people tick. And the best way was to go off to university and study psychology. So 7 years I studied psychology, and as soon as it was time to graduate, I decided that I was too passionate about business to completely turn my back to business in general. So even while the family business and the family business environment wasn't quite suitable for me at the time, I still really loved working with people in a business environment and made good money. And so I took on a job as a regional European sales manager, looking after 6 countries in Europe, working with a core group of very sophisticated dealers, as we call them, and service them while also developing another brand in the same industry in the same market. And that was a really good learning environment, because this company that I worked for was a division of a Fortune 500 company. And the very thing that I've learned there, the key lesson that is of course important as relevant to coaching, is that great systems and great people make a world of difference. Then of course it was time for me to go off to the next journey. I did this for about five and a half years, and along the way I had met this lady from Australia, a lady that I've fallen in love with while at a trade fair selling my portable spas at an expo in Spain. And she lived there at the time, and of course we started seeing each other, and you know, between Belgium and Spain we were going back and forth. After a while she joined me in Belgium, but then she kind of felt that it was time for her to move back home and spend more time with her mother. And so guess what I did? I decided to pack up my bag, hang up my coat and follow her. So suddenly I'm without a job. I moved to Australia, and within 2 weeks after arriving, also bought a franchise, committed myself to a $100,000 personal loan, and then soon after, the missus said, you know what, Bram, this is not working out for me. I think we have to part ways. And there I was in a new country, left on my own, without any friends, without any family, having to leave the home, having serious bills to pay for, and not a single client. Now that was challenging, I can tell you. And I probably went through the worst cycle in terms of feeling negative about myself, blaming her and the new boyfriend for my misfortune, and of course refusing to take responsibility for a long time until I kind of got fed up with myself, dusted myself off, sought help, because that's another valuable lesson. Sometimes it is too hard to be on our own, or we might just spin our tires on our own. And so I really recognized that right now I couldn't help myself, and I was just going around in this really negativity, this spiral of negativity, and I had to break free of that. So I went off, sought help, professional help. I managed to get myself back in a good space within. And as they say, once your mind is really good in a good space within, and you free yourself up from the negative emotions that sometimes as humans we do struggle with, then suddenly things start to change for the better, because we think differently, we feel differently, we treat other people differently, and guess what? It's like karma. You either build good karma and it comes back in a good way to you, or you set up bad karma and that also splashes back in your face. While I was in this franchise for 6 years, I did really well. I grew my business pretty much year on year, and in a new country without any credentials, no client book that I had of my own. And I really drummed it all up myself, doing it the hard way. And this is what I've learned. Having a good idea of your business model and ensuring that your business model is really a business model that will help you to scale and grow indefinitely is an important matter. I didn't quite get it at the time when I walked in. I just started selling time. Time in terms of a consultant, times in terms of a trainer, times as a coach. All of that are services. 6 years into this business venture, I kind of noticed that the business model was great for the franchisor and the person who actually created the IP for me, in this case Brian Tracy, but it wasn't necessarily the best business model for the person at the far end, which was the franchisee. And so that's why after 6 years and reaching the top 3 in the Australia-New Zealand region, I decided that this was not the right fit for me any longer, and I parted ways. Amicably, yes, kept good relationships with everybody involved, but I wanted now to actually create my own IP and make my own name rather than build somebody else's. And so the thing that I've learned there was the business model. Having the right business model is important, because Brian Tracy got paid out of every single manual that I facilitated as a training program with people. So he made it once, set it and forget it, and it kept paying him a dividend over time. I don't hold any negative grudges against Brian Tracy or the franchisor. In fact, I've learned heaps. At the same time, I also learned that it was now time for me to become more smart with the way I run a business. And that's then also taken me to the next step. I didn't have quite figured out yet how to make the online work for me, because I knew that the online world was the place for me to be and to grow into. But I didn't quite have the right systems from a marketing and sales perspective, and even from a delivery perspective, yet in place, because I was still holding on to some of my old school way of thinking, which was how to make sales, it needs to be face-to-face. Business networking functions is the way to go. You need to kind of sit down with people and work them through the solution so that you can make the sale there and then. And so these were all my old luggage, so to speak, that I had a hard time shaking off. And also because of my love of doing live events, I kept doing these really expensive live events that also, geographically speaking, limited the outcomes. And that's, again, a great learning lesson. While I was also doing consulting for large corporations and fast growth SMEs, I also noticed that there's only so much time you can sell. And very soon I was at the top of the game in terms of the amount of money that people would pay for the time I invested. But I also was pretty much depleting the available time I had. So the only way for me to grow was either to hire more people like me, or I would leverage myself through technologies and systems. And that was the next journey that I went on. It took me a while to figure out, but that is really the one that would allow me to leverage the business model and make it better. As I said earlier, one of the challenges that I had as a business owner was that cash flow was up and down, especially with consulting and training live face-to-face and coaching face-to-face. There's only so many projects that you can sell and handle yourself, after which your time dries up. And as you're delivering the work, you also have to maintain a future pipeline that will guarantee future sales, and that was sometimes a bit of a struggle. So while the business was growing, one month cash flow would be here and another month cash flow would be there, and the expenses would still be there. And so that was a challenge that I definitely noticed as a business owner. So after many years of having this up and down as a roller coaster cash flow, my wife and I had a final, really decisive conversation about the fact that she was not willing to put up with it anymore. And as good wives do, they give us a kick in the butt, they hold us accountable, and they also help us to see a different picture. We need to sometimes broaden our horizon, expand our vision, see reality through a different lens. I swallowed my pride. I pretty much went to market and made my services available, this time for a company to hire me full time. Yes, went to work for someone else. I think I got to terms with the idea after many months, and of course these conversations with my wife. I kind of saw a benefit in having a full-time employment with guaranteed income at the exact same time without all the risks and the investments that I would have taken on my own in my own business. And so having that stability, having peace of mind, having a good family environment to return into and no stress of this other stuff was something that was favorable to me at the time. It was appealing. And so therefore, yes, I found a job as a general manager, went to work in this business, looked like a really great opportunity, and 5 months into it, the boss pulled me in about a 10-minute conversation. I was meant to pack up my bag and go without saying goodbye to all of my staff, all of my peers, and just leave it for what it was within an hour. I will admit, it still hurts an experience where you are asked to go with an alibi, so-called, to mask what really was happening, and do it in that sort of way. The learning that I get out of that is that empathizing with people makes a huge difference. If you are able to position yourself in the shoes of the person on the other side, you can actually work amicably towards an outcome that is meant in everybody's best interest. And as a result of this more humbling experience, I also now believe that tuning in with other people's feelings and work through things with them is really a valuable skill set to have. This brings me now to number 7. As soon as I left this business, I obviously had to dust myself off, kind of heal the wounds of the ego, and it was now just me asking myself, like, you know, what am I going to do next? And I knew in my heart that the right thing forward for me now was to ensure that I would still do the right thing by the family, stabilize the income, but also still live in line with my values, which is where I started in the first place. Build the business in a smarter way than I had ever done before. And this time, where I would do the following. Services would be only the last. The first thing to do was actually create and sell products that I could automate from the get-go. Second thing would be subscriptions, as in memberships. And once again, the more I could use technology and systems to automate both the marketing, selling, and the delivery of it, the more time I would have to work on the business and potentially also to do service-based things. So products first, then subscriptions, only then followed by services. You're leveraging a product that you can create once, set it and forget it, and kind of reap the rewards for it for years, decades, and even centuries to come. You're building something up for the future, and you don't personally have to be involved all the time. So I'm fully changed my business model by just changing the priorities around. That means now that products and subscriptions are the cream and butter. That's the way that I'm building the business, while services are the cream. But if I reflect now on my old days, I would have easily try to please everybody and work with everybody that wanted to work with me. And that is not really a good idea. What is a great idea is to really niche down on the very core people that you service really well, your ideal clients, and only work with them. If you then also create more of demand for that service, then of course you're really creating a much better business once again. Whether this story, these learning lessons are the same for you or not, just again think about it. It's important that you learn the lessons along the way and that you're putting the right things in place, just as I have also learned the hard way and then made better decisions moving forward. And so coming back to coaching, when you are working with a coach, these coaches can actually help you to learn the lessons more quickly, save a lot of time, change the course for the better more rapidly, so that you save yourself the costly mistakes along the way and fast track the results instead. If you like this video, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Also, I'd love to hear what you've taken out of this that is of value to you. So leave me a comment Of course, questions are always welcome too. I look forward to seeing you in the next video where I will actually be talking to you about my very impact business coaching framework. And I would love for you to tune in with me there again. My name is Bram. Thanks again for joining.